What if the one holiday special meant to mend an image ended up breaking it instead? What if the very moment designed to show warmth, connection, and festive joy suddenly became the loudest, coldest echo chamber Meghan Markle has faced since walking away from the royal family? That's the question that ricocheted across the internet the moment ratings dropped hard on Meghan's Netflix Christmas special. A moment that was expected to be glowing, triumphant, maybe even healing, instantly transformed into a digital avalanche of criticism, headlines, commentary, and whispers from both inside and outside her inner circle. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because the truth is simple, no one, absolutely no one, expected this. A holiday special falling flat is one thing. A holiday special being branded joyless, fake, plastic, and robotic is another. But to be hit with a reported 1.3 out of 10 rating? That's not a stumble. That's not even a fall. That's the kind of number that entertainment analysts look at twice just to make sure the decimal isn't in the wrong place. And the fact that it happened to Meghan Markle, a woman whose every public move is scrutinized, interpreted, reframed, and weaponized, made it feel less like a simple media moment and more like a cultural explosion. But here's the real question. Why did this particular special strike such a nerve? On paper, the concept was harmless. Sweet, even. A Christmas celebration titled, With Love, Meghan, featuring Meghan decorating a Christmas tree, preparing elegant crafts, hosting friends for cozy seasonal activities, demonstrating beautiful gift wrapping complete with wax seals and perfectly tied ribbons. Every frame was polished. Every object was curated. Every moment looked like it was styled by a luxury lifestyle magazine with a budget big enough to make a Rockefeller Christmas jealous. Yet viewers didn't feel joy. They didn't feel warmth. They didn't feel holiday spirit. Instead, many felt a strange coldness, a distance, a void, as if everything was beautiful but nothing was alive. And that realization sparked the first wave of uneasy questions online. Questions like, where's the laughter? Where's the chaos? Where's the realness? Why does everything look staged? Why does Meghan seem alone? Why does she look so focused on perfection that she forgot people were supposed to feel something? Entertainment is emotional. Holiday specials even more so. You don't watch them for technical brilliance. You watch them to feel connected, nostalgic, warm. You watch to feel human. But this production, according to critics, felt like it was made by someone terrified of showing the imperfect side of that humanity. And that's where the trouble began. Because when something that's supposed to feel cozy ends up feeling clinical, people react with confusion first and frustration second. The moment confusion turns into criticism, the internet takes over. And once the internet takes over, you no longer control the narrative. The narrative controls you. And if there was one critic who shaped that narrative instantly, sharply, brutally, unapologetically, it was columnist Alison Pearson. Her words weren't gentle. They weren't subtle. They weren't trying to soften the blow. She wrote, "Joyless and fake, what a strange person Meghan is. The uptight, step-forward hostess is the last person I'd want to spend Christmas with." Whether someone agreed or disagreed, the line was impossible to ignore. It stuck. It circulated. It became a soundbite, a meme, a frame through which thousands began reinterpreting the special. And suddenly, viewers didn't just feel the special was cold. They had language for why they felt it. Joyless, artificial, step forward. Those words spread like wildfire. But underneath the criticism was something even more important, a deep sense that Meghan had missed an emotional opportunity. A Christmas special isn't supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be heartfelt. It's supposed to show glimpses of vulnerability, humor, flaws, surprises. Those little unscripted moments that tell the audience, hey, this isn't a presentation. This is a real holiday moment. Yet the special was described as image first, emotion second, aesthetic first, authenticity second, controlled, curated, polished, every inch planned, every detail manicured to perfection. A media analyst summed it up simply. When a host is meticulously curated, it creates distance rather than connection. Think about that. Curated, distanced, the very opposite of Christmas spirit. But the moment that truly left people puzzled wasn't the decor or the tone or the lighting or even the wax seals. It was the absence. The absence of the two people everyone expected to see, Archie and Lilibet, in a holiday special, in a show built around family, warmth, and togetherness, in a production claiming to offer an intimate look at holiday traditions that mean the most. They weren't there. Not for tree decorating, not for baking, not for crafts, not for gift wrapping, not even as a brief cameo. And viewers noticed. Critics noticed. Alison Pearson noticed, and pointed out something that added a layer of unease. The cousins have never met. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, Prince Louis. None of them have met Archie or Lilibet. A strange, lingering, unanswered detail. A wound that only widened the moment the special pretended the absence did not exist. The emotional gap in the show mirrored the real-world familial distance, and the audience felt it. One insider put it bluntly, the Duchess is presenting a perfect image, and it comes across as controlled and artificial rather than warm or inviting. Another added, it's clear that for Meghan, the emphasis is on image and perfection. Even the smallest details, wrapping, tree decorations, are elevated, leaving no space for spontaneity or fun. Now pause for a second. Think about your own holidays. The best moments aren't the perfectly staged ones. They're the messy ones, the unexpected ones. The burnt cookies, the crooked ornaments, the kids running around, the laughter that comes from things going wrong. Perfection doesn't create memories. Imperfection does. But Meghan's special didn't offer imperfection. It offered precision. And precision, no matter how beautiful, doesn't hug the audience back. This reaction didn't erupt because Meghan is Meghan. It erupted because the production was missing the very ingredient people crave most during the holiday season: sincerity. And once viewers sensed it, they rewatched the special with a more critical eye. Suddenly, every slow smile, every polished gesture, every camera-ready expression became a symbol of what the special lacked: warmth, realness, spontaneity. That's when the backlash ignited. Social media threads erupted with comparisons to lifestyle influencers, scripted commercials, and curated Instagram moments. But the harshest reactions came from something deeper: disappointment. People wanted to feel something. They wanted to connect. They wanted to see the Meghan they believed existed, the empathetic, expressive, emotional storyteller. Instead, they felt like they got a brand. But here's the twist. None of this was inevitable. None of this had to go this way. The show could have been a turning point, a chance to reclaim narrative warmth, a bridge back to public empathy. Instead, it became the opposite. And as reviews poured in, as memes circulated, as critics sharpened their commentary, the moment became too big for Meghan to ignore. Because she didn't just hear the backlash. She felt it. Deeply. Perhaps more than anyone anticipated. But why? Why did this particular moment strike so deeply that insiders described her as shaken, stunned, even privately emotional? Because the special wasn't just a project. It was personal. It was designed to showcase joy, control the narrative, soften her public image, and offer the world a glimpse of what she wanted them to believe about her. But instead of offering a safe space for rebranding, it became a mirror, reflecting back the very critiques she had been trying to outrun. And that's where the story truly begins. Because once the criticism reached its peak, once the reviews stabilized at a brutally low rating, and once the internal conversations began behind closed doors, people close to Meghan started whispering about what happened next. And what happened next, no one saw coming. Because this wasn't just about ratings. This wasn't just about a holiday special. This wasn't even about public perception. This was about how one failed project triggered a domino effect that stretched far beyond Netflix, far beyond critics, and far beyond what anyone expected. And the very first domino? A single, quiet moment Meghan reportedly had when she realized the entire world had seen something she didn't intend to show. The crack in the image. The emotional fallout. The shift. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the very day that was supposed to be a celebration became a day of quiet dread? Imagine stepping onto a set, camera lights glowing, festive decorations all around, music in the background, and yet sensing a tension that hangs in the air like fog. That's exactly what insiders claim the premiere day of Meghan Markle's Netflix holiday special felt like behind the scenes. Everyone expected sparkle. Everyone expected warmth. But according to sources, The first few hours of production revealed something different, a subtle unease that hinted at what the public would later see as an emotional disconnect. It started with the atmosphere on set. Usually, a holiday special is filled with laughter, chatter, impromptu jokes, and the kind of chaos that keeps production teams on their toes. But this set was different. Sources describe a meticulousness bordering on obsession. Every ornament placed with precise care. Every gift wrapped with mathematical symmetry. Every camera angle rehearsed. Every light measured to perfection. The environment was sterile, pristine, almost as if the holiday itself had been trapped in a snow globe and shaken only by the production team's careful hands. The first sign of tension came from the production team itself. A producer reportedly whispered to a colleague during a rehearsal, "Something feels off. It's all perfect, but it's missing. I don't know life." That unease was subtle, but in a creative environment where spontaneity usually fuels charm, it was noticeable. Viewers rarely get to see the invisible struggles behind television productions. They see the finished product, a curated, polished vision. They see Meghan smiling at the camera, arranging presents, explaining holiday crafts. They see perfection. They do not see the silent debate over whether a laugh sounded rehearsed. They do not see the camera operators sharing glances over the lack of playful chaos. They do not see the tension that quietly builds when every moment is scripted, down to the wax seal on the wrapping paper. And yet, that tension is there. Insiders reported that Meghan herself seemed unusually focused, as if the cameras were not just capturing her, but constantly testing her. She moved through the set like a conductor leading an orchestra, orchestrating every motion, every gesture, every interaction. Nothing was left to chance. Nothing was spontaneous. Every smile was calibrated. Every hand movement calculated. The hallmark of someone intensely aware of the lens, aware of the audience, aware of the weight of expectations resting on her shoulders. But here's where it becomes complicated. Because audiences are not just looking for a beautiful set or a polished host. Audiences are looking for connection. They are looking for warmth. They are looking for authenticity. And the very thing that made the special visually perfect, its meticulous curation, was the same thing that built an invisible wall between Meghan and the viewers. It wasn't just critics who noticed this. Staff on set, makeup artists, lighting specialists, and even co-hosts reportedly commented on the unusual level of control. One crew member allegedly said, "Every expression, every smile, it felt like it had to be just right. There was no room for fun, no room for mistakes. You could feel it in the air, the energy was tense." That tension translated on screen. For the audience, the result was a show that looked flawless, but felt distant, cold, almost clinical. The first few minutes of the special set the tone. Meghan enters, tree twinkling behind her, presents meticulously wrapped, music playing softly. She smiles at the camera, explaining her favorite holiday traditions. She gives detailed instructions on gift wrapping, complete with tutorials on using wax seals. Everything is elegant, structured, meticulous. And yet, despite all the visual charm, something feels missing. There's no laughter when a ribbon misbehaves. There's no candid reaction when a craft doesn't turn out perfectly. There's no warmth in the interactions because the interactions themselves are staged. Even the choice of activities contributed to this sense of distance. Baking cookies? Perfectly symmetrical, perfectly photographed. Crafting ornaments? Each one placed deliberately for maximum visual appeal. Every detail screams precision. But audiences respond to imperfection, to the little flubs that make moments memorable. The very moments Meghan avoids, the messy frosting, the crooked ornament, the misbehaving glue, are the moments viewers crave. By excising these, the show unintentionally excises relatability. And it's not just a matter of aesthetics. There's a psychological element at play. Human beings are wired to detect authenticity. Our brains respond to spontaneous smiles, laughter, and candid moments. We feel warmth from imperfection. When those cues are missing, when every expression and gesture is controlled, the audience feels an invisible distance. And in the case of Meghan's special, the absence of those cues left a vacuum. A cold, empty space where holiday joy should have been. The set itself, no matter how beautiful, became a paradox. Everything was arranged to evoke comfort and warmth, but the over-curation prevented it. Experts in media psychology note that audiences do not just watch a show, they subconsciously measure energy, spontaneity, and vulnerability. When perfection dominates, energy stagnates, and vulnerability disappears. What remains is a show that is visually striking but emotionally muted. And yet, Meghan reportedly tried to inject warmth wherever she could. Crew members described moments where she laughed softly when a camera angle didn't cooperate, or adjusted her own placement when a craft wasn't perfect. But those moments were fleeting, subtle, almost imperceptible on camera. And for viewers watching at home, these glimpses of humanity were swallowed by the show's broader aesthetic. The camera captured perfection, not imperfection, and therefore it captured distance, not connection. Another critical factor that contributed to the show's reception was the absence of Meghan's children, Archie and Lilibet. In any holiday special, family presence is central. Family signals connection, warmth, and authenticity. In this special, the children were absent. Their absence was noted by critics and viewers alike. It created a gap in the narrative, a space where warmth and spontaneity should have lived, but did not. Alison Pearson's critique amplified this point. Joyless and fake, what a strange person Meghan is. The uptight, step-forward hostess is the last person I'd want to spend Christmas with, Pearson wrote. That comment, harsh as it was, touched on a deeper issue. The show's overemphasis on visual perfection at the expense of emotional resonance. And in an era where social media amplifies every reaction, that sentiment became a lens through which viewers interpreted the entire special. The reaction wasn't just critical, it was cumulative. Reviews, social media posts, and private conversations among staff painted a picture of a show that had failed to reach its intended emotional target. A media analyst summarized it simply: viewers respond to warmth and authenticity. When a host is meticulously curated, it creates distance rather than connection. And it's not hard to understand why. Meghan, aware of public scrutiny, likely sought to control the narrative through precision. Each detail, from wax seals to perfectly aligned ornaments, was meant to convey sophistication and care. But in attempting to control every detail, she inadvertently removed the very elements that would allow viewers to connect with her. The more she tried to ensure perfection, the less human she appeared. By the time the special premiered, the set's tension, the meticulously orchestrated performances, and the absence of spontaneity converged to create a product that audiences could admire visually but struggled to emotionally connect with. The aesthetic polish, intended to charm, instead created a perceptual barrier. And the result? Confusion, critique, and ultimately, disappointment. And yet, all of this is only part of the story. Behind closed doors, insiders describe an emotional undercurrent, a quiet anxiety on the day of filming. Meghan, reportedly aware of the stakes, was attentive, precise, and focused. But she was also reportedly tense. A subtle mix of determination and apprehension colored her movements. Every smile measured, every gesture intentional, every step calculated. There's a thin line between control and rigidity, and according to those on set, that line was crossed just enough to impact the overall atmosphere. It is perhaps this very tension, the combination of audience expectation, critical scrutiny, and self-imposed precision, that set the stage for the broader fallout. Because while the cameras captured a polished holiday aesthetic, they could not capture the emotional complexity, the internal pressure, or the subtle moments of vulnerability that insiders say were present but fleeting. And so, by the time the first reviews surfaced, the special had already been defined by what was absent: warmth, spontaneity, and emotional accessibility. The audience's perception had been subtly shaped, almost in real time, by the cues broadcasted through every meticulously staged frame. And the critics' words, combined with social media chatter, created a narrative almost impossible to escape: that this holiday special, for all its visual splendor, lacked heart. But here's the twist that no one saw coming on premiere day. The story didn't end with the broadcast. The reactions, both public and private, triggered a series of events and emotional ripples that would affect not just the perception of the special, but also Meghan's personal experience, her relationship with her team, and the way future projects would be approached. Because behind every critique, there's a human being who feels it. And according to insiders, Meghan felt it deeply. The first chapter of this holiday special story is not just about production design or ratings. It's about tension, anticipation, expectation, and the subtle fractures that occur when human emotion meets meticulous curation. It's about what happens when a carefully constructed image collides with the emotional reality of the audience. And it's about the quiet, almost imperceptible signals that foreshadowed the wave of critique and controversy that would follow. And what came next? Once the cameras stopped rolling and the first reviews were published, once social media began to dissect every detail, once ratings landed far below expectations, the real story began. A story of emotional fallout, strategic recalibration, and unexpected revelations that no one saw coming. Because this was just the beginning, and the first domino had already fallen. The cameras had stopped rolling, the set had been packed away, and yet the tension that had defined the day refused to dissipate. Behind the glossy, polished frames that would later air on Netflix, something far subtler and far more consequential was happening. A producer reportedly pulled a colleague aside and whispered words that would later define the narrative surrounding the special. "I think we missed something. It's beautiful, yes, but there's no heart." Those words, quiet at the time, would echo through the corridors of social media, through the reviews of critics, and into the private reflections of the star herself. To understand what went wrong, one must look behind the lens. The production process, often invisible to audiences, is a delicate dance of vision, timing, and personality. Every holiday special has a formula. Create an inviting set, feature relatable activities, generate emotional resonance, and capture it all with a blend of spontaneity and direction. On this set, however, every step leaned heavily toward control. Every camera angle, every lighting adjustment, every moment was premeditated. While this might produce visual perfection, insiders explain it also stifles creativity, spontaneity, and the natural flow that audiences unconsciously crave. According to crew members, the first red flag wasn't the special itself, it was the rehearsal process. The cameras were rolling even when rehearsals were occurring, meaning every expression was scrutinized, every hand gesture cataloged, and every smile evaluated for its efficacy on screen. There was little room for improvisation, little room for mistakes, little room for laughter that wasn't choreographed. Even small errors felt amplified, one production assistant admitted. It was as if the set was aware that imperfection could ruin everything, so perfection became the only option. But perfection can be paradoxical. It shines on the surface but casts shadows underneath. Those shadows became evident in subtle ways. Observers noticed that Meghan's interactions, though polite and visually appealing, lacked the spark that typically endears a host to their audience. When guests engaged with her, the smiles felt rehearsed, the laughter timed, the energy controlled. The contrast between the warmth of a holiday environment and the precision of every gesture created an almost imperceptible tension, a tension that audiences, even subconsciously, could sense. Even more crucial was the absence of candid humor, an element that transforms scripted content into something relatable. Holiday specials thrive on spontaneity, the misbehaving frosting, the way a ribbon refuses to tie, the children laughing at an unexpected mishap. Yet the crew repeatedly noted that Meghan prioritized aesthetics over imperfection. Even minor mishaps were corrected before they could occur on camera, leaving the final product visually flawless but emotionally sanitized. You could see it in her eyes, a behind-the-scenes insider explained. She wanted everything to look right. She wanted to control the perception. But in doing so, she removed the spontaneity that gives a show life. The psychological impact of this control extended beyond the audience. It affected the production team as well. Typically, a creative team on a holiday set thrives on flexibility and playful energy. On this set, however, sources describe a cautious, tense environment. Every action was calculated, every motion measured. There were no surprises, no organic bursts of joy, and no moments where creativity could take its natural course. The meticulousness that should have enhanced the visual experience inadvertently created a sterile environment, one that translated directly onto the screen. And yet, Meghan reportedly attempted to infuse warmth wherever she could. There are accounts of small, private moments on set, a soft laugh at an unexpected technical error, a fleeting glance that conveyed genuine affection for her guests, a subtle gesture of kindness to a crew member. These moments, however, were fleeting and almost imperceptible once the cameras were rolling. They existed in the margins, in the pauses, in the small human gestures that often make television feel alive. But the final cut, a careful mosaic of visually perfect frames, erased much of this human texture. It wasn't just the production style that contributed to the perceived coldness, it was also the thematic choices. The activities featured in the special were elegant and visually appealing, but emotionally distant. Gift wrapping demonstrations were precise, decorations perfectly symmetrical, and crafts executed with exacting care. Baking segments showcase culinary skill but lacked the chaos and laughter that make holiday cooking relatable. Each sequence was meticulously arranged, leaving little space for improvisation or genuine interaction. The polish was beautiful, but it felt like watching a museum exhibit instead of a family gathering, one insider said. And then there was the absence of family members, a recurring point that critics and audiences alike highlighted. Meghan's children, Archie and Lilibet, were not present for any segment. In a holiday special centered on family warmth and shared experiences, their absence was conspicuous. Critics framed this as a narrative gap, an emotional void that reinforced the perception of distance. It was as if the most important part of a holiday, connection with loved ones, was missing, wrote one media analyst. The absence of these children, combined with the meticulous staging, created an atmosphere that viewers perceived as joyless and controlled. Alison Pearson's commentary further amplified these perceptions. Her words painted a picture of Meghan as an overly meticulous, even robotic hostess, concerned more with appearance than with authentic engagement. By labeling her a step-forward hostess, Pearson struck a chord with audiences, providing language for the emotional disconnect they had sensed but struggled to articulate. This critique was amplified by social media, where viewers dissected every frame, every expression, and every gesture. The combination of critical opinion and public discourse cemented a narrative that the special was visually perfect but emotionally barren. The ripple effect of these critiques extended beyond public perception. According to insiders, Meghan experienced a private emotional toll. The special was personal, crafted with the intent to showcase joy, warmth, and connection. The public reception, however, reframed those efforts as missteps. It's one thing to be critiqued, one source explained. It's another to have your intentions misunderstood so completely. That's the part that really hits hard. The combination of meticulous self-control on set and public backlash afterward created a feedback loop that intensified emotional strain. The production's emphasis on perfection over imperfection also had a measurable impact on storytelling. Holiday specials are narratives built around moments of human imperfection, unexpected laughter, playful mistakes, unscripted interactions. By prioritizing aesthetic control, the special inadvertently removed narrative tension and surprise, leaving a polished but static experience. Experts in audience psychology note that when storytelling removes imperfection, the audience loses a point of entry, a way to relate to characters or hosts. Meghan's audience, therefore, could admire the craftsmanship but could not emotionally engage. This delicate balance between control and connection is central to understanding the fallout. The very elements intended to impress, perfect decor, elegant wrapping, flawless gestures, paradoxically alienated viewers. The disconnect between visual perfection and emotional resonance created a subtle, pervasive tension that became the lens through which every critique, every social media post, and every rating was interpreted. And that tension carried forward into the public release. When the special premiered, the combination of meticulous production, absence of spontaneity, and missing family presence created an immediate sense of detachment. Ratings dropped, reviews were scathing, and social media erupted with commentary. Audience members commented on the precision but lamented the lack of warmth. Critics dissected the absence of candid moments, while insiders reflected privately on the missed opportunities for connection. Yet what makes this chapter particularly compelling is the insight it provides into the unseen pressures of producing content in the spotlight. Meghan's careful attention to detail and desire for control were understandable, especially given the scrutiny she faces as a public figure. But perfection comes at a cost, and in this case, the cost was audience connection. By attempting to control every visual element, she inadvertently created a barrier that kept viewers at arm's length, no matter how polished the final product appeared. And so, the stage was set for the next chapter of the story. The arrival of critics' reviews, the viral spread of memes and commentary, and the internal emotional reckoning that insiders claim Meghan experienced in private. The tension built on set, subtle though it was, would explode into a wave of public discourse, defining the special not for its craftsmanship, but for its perceived lack of heart. And yet, the most critical insight from behind the scenes is this. Even within the control, even amidst the precision, there were fleeting glimpses of humanity, moments of genuine warmth that almost reached the audience but were lost in translation. Those fleeting moments, insiders suggest, became a source of quiet frustration, a sense that the audience might have felt something profound, if only the production allowed imperfection and spontaneity to shine. But what came next would escalate the situation far beyond ratings, far beyond social media chatter, and far beyond production critiques. Because once the critics' words began circulating, once the first waves of commentary hit the public sphere, the reality of perception collided with intention, setting in motion a series of reactions that would leave both audiences and insiders stunned. The day the first major review hit the internet, it was like a spark landing on dry kindling. In the quiet of her home, Meghan Markle reportedly saw words that made her pause, not with anger, but with a kind of stunned disbelief. Critics had dissected her holiday special with surgical precision, noting every frame, every gesture, every carefully curated detail. And at the center of that scrutiny was Alison Pearson, a columnist known for her sharp, often unflinching commentary. Her words landed like a blow. Joyless and fake, what a strange person Meghan is. The uptight, step-forward hostess is the last person I'd want to spend Christmas with. Those words weren't just commentary. They were a narrative framing. They crystallized a public perception, offering a language for audiences to interpret the special. And as the review circulated, it ignited a wave of conversation across media outlets, social platforms, and private conversations alike. Suddenly, viewers who had initially approached the special with curiosity were analyzing it through the lens of step-forward perfection, scrutinizing every smile, every move, every meticulously wrapped present. But what exactly led Pearson to deliver such a pointed critique? To understand this, one must consider the unique pressures and expectations surrounding Meghan Markle as a public figure. Since stepping back from royal duties, she has been under an unprecedented microscope. Every project, from interviews to television appearances, is interpreted as a calculated move, a statement, or a reflection of her personality. There is little room for nuance or error. Audiences and critics alike project assumptions onto every action. In this context, a holiday special, designed to feel warm and intimate, becomes subject to disproportionate scrutiny. Pearson's review focused on several key elements: the meticulously staged decor, the absence of children, and the over-curated presentation. She noted the artificiality of the interactions, the lack of spontaneous joy, and the overarching impression that the host was prioritizing image over authentic connection. To her, the special felt less like a celebration and more like a performance, a visual exercise in precision devoid of emotional resonance. And yet, behind those words lies a more complex narrative. Critics and insiders alike acknowledge that producing a television special under scrutiny of this magnitude is no small feat. Every camera angle, every detail, every frame must account for both aesthetic appeal and audience perception. For someone like Meghan, acutely aware of public expectations, the pressure to create a flawless presentation is immense. But as media psychologists often note, perfection and authenticity rarely coexist in the same space. The tighter the control, the greater the perceived distance between the host and the audience. Pearson's critique also highlighted what many viewers felt intuitively: the absence of candid humor or warmth. Holiday specials live in the in-between moments. The minor mishaps, the laughter that erupts spontaneously, the awkward but endearing gestures. By eliminating or minimizing these moments, the special inadvertently constructed a barrier between Meghan and the audience. Every wax seal, every perfectly aligned ornament, every precise wrapping technique became a signal of distance rather than connection. The critique extended to Meghan herself, framing her as a step-forward hostess. This phrase, intentionally evocative, conjures images of meticulous control, robotic politeness, and an absence of genuine emotion. For viewers, it crystallized a suspicion that had lingered beneath the surface, that the holiday special, for all its beauty, was missing the human spark essential to creating engagement. And for Meghan, the impact of this label was reportedly profound. Sources describe a quiet moment of reflection, a recognition that the project intended to project warmth and joy had instead been interpreted as controlled and joyless. But Pearson was not the only critic framing the narrative. Other media analysts and cultural commentators picked up on similar threads. Observers noted that the special lacked candid interaction, relied heavily on visual aesthetics, and emphasized meticulous control over spontaneous engagement. While the production values were high and the visual presentation polished, the emotional resonance was muted. In other words, it looked good, but it didn't feel good. It's important to recognize that this perception was not entirely unfounded. According to insiders, the filming process prioritized appearance over improvisation. Crew members reported that Meghan meticulously planned every gesture, every smile, and every interaction, leaving little room for unscripted moments. While this approach ensured visual cohesion, it came at the expense of warmth and authenticity. The very decisions that were intended to secure approval inadvertently reinforced the critiques leveled by Pearson and others. Social media amplified this effect. Clips from the special were shared with commentary highlighting this step-forward quality, pointing out the absence of children and emphasizing the meticulousness of every detail. Memes and GIFs quickly spread, exaggerating moments of stiffness or overly calculated gestures. The public discourse shifted from curiosity to analysis, and analysis quickly shifted to judgment. For someone who has spent years navigating public perception, the impact of such widespread scrutiny is not trivial. The tension between intention and perception becomes even clearer when considering the intended message of the special. Meghan's goal was reportedly to showcase warmth, family traditions, and holiday joy. The visuals, activities, and curated interactions were designed to communicate care, connection, and a festive spirit. Yet, because of the execution, the perceived message diverged sharply from the intended message. The meticulously staged visuals became symbols of control rather than joy. The absence of her children became a conspicuous gap in narrative authenticity. And every calculated gesture became fodder for critique. And here lies a paradox central to understanding the fallout. The more carefully a public figure crafts an image, the more it is interpreted as an image rather than reality. In striving for perfection, Meghan may have inadvertently triggered the very critiques she sought to avoid. Her attention to detail, intended to demonstrate care and sophistication, was instead interpreted as artificiality. Her meticulously planned gestures, designed to convey warmth, were read as rigid performance. The public, conditioned to seek authenticity and spontaneity, detected the gap between presentation and human imperfection. The result was a convergence of critique, perception, and public sentiment that intensified the impact of Pearson's words. Her framing of Meghan as joyless and fake did not exist in isolation. It was amplified by broader media discourse, social media commentary, and audience perception. This convergence created a narrative that was difficult to counter. Meghan's holiday special was visually impressive but emotionally distant, and she, as the host, appeared controlled and detached. But there is another layer worth examining: the psychological effect of such critiques on the subject themselves. Sources describe Meghan's reaction not as defensive outrage, but as reflective concern. The criticism did not merely highlight perceived flaws in the special. It highlighted a gap between intention and reception, a gap that, for someone acutely aware of public perception, can be emotionally significant. Insiders report that she reportedly felt a mix of frustration, disappointment, and determination. The words on the page and the reactions online were not just commentary. They were feedback on her personal and creative expression. Furthermore, the critique extended beyond mere stylistic observations. Pearson's commentary implicitly questioned the authenticity of Meghan's persona, framing her as a host who prioritizes image over human connection. This critique touches on a long-standing narrative and public discourse surrounding Meghan, the tension between how she is perceived and how she intends to be perceived. For audiences, the step-forward hostess label becomes shorthand for a broader skepticism about authenticity. For Meghan, it represents a challenge to reconcile self-expression with public expectation. And yet, despite the critique, there were elements within the special that showed genuine effort to connect. Crew members noted that Meghan engaged warmly with her guests in private moments, offered personal reflections during downtime, and demonstrated care in guiding activities. These moments, however, were largely invisible to the audience. The careful editing and focus on visual perfection erased much of the human texture, leaving a product that, while polished, lacked the emotional resonance necessary for widespread audience connection. It is this disconnect between intention and perception that defines the chapter. Pearson's critique, while harsh, resonated because it captured the essence of what viewers subconsciously sensed. The holiday special was controlled, meticulously curated, and visually appealing, yet emotionally distant. The words joyless and fake became shorthand for a phenomenon that had been brewing silently throughout the production. The tension between perfection and authenticity, between intention and reception, between curated image and human warmth. The aftermath of the review set the stage for the next wave of discourse. Social media amplified Pearson's language. Audience discussion dissected every frame, and the narrative of a controlled, step-forward-like holiday special became entrenched. For Meghan, the impact was not merely reputational, it was emotional. Insiders describe a private reckoning, a quiet reflection on what the special had intended to communicate versus what the audience perceived. And that reflection would soon lead to more revelations, more insights from insiders, and a deeper understanding of the emotional stakes involved in producing content under intense public scrutiny. Because the story of this holiday special is not just about aesthetics or ratings. It is about the collision between human intention and public perception, between personal expression and cultural expectation, between curated perfection and authentic emotion. And what came next? The reviews had landed, the public conversation had begun, and the ripple effect was growing. The next chapter would explore how the broader media ecosystem reacted, how audiences interpreted the absence of key elements, and how private conversations among Meghan's inner circle began to shape the narrative in ways that no one anticipated. By the morning after the special premiered, the digital landscape was ablaze. Social media feeds were filled with reactions, memes, and critiques that spread faster than any marketing campaign could have hoped or feared. The 1.3/10 rating, now confirmed by multiple platforms, had become a rallying point for commentators, fans, critics, and casual viewers alike. But beyond the numbers, there was a subtler phenomenon unfolding. People weren't just judging the special, they were judging Meghan herself. It started with the memes. Short clips from the special circulated online, highlighting moments that seemed stiff, calculated, or overly polished. One particularly viral clip showed her carefully adjusting a ribbon on a gift with an expression of intense focus. Captioned with phrases like, "When perfection is mandatory," the video instantly went viral. Audiences recognized meticulous effort, but they also recognized a lack of spontaneity. The humor of the clip derived not just from the visual, but from the dissonance between effort and warmth. Critics joined in. Cultural commentators, entertainment reporters, and lifestyle columnists dissected the show frame by frame. While some praised the visual aesthetics, most highlighted what they considered the central flaw, an overemphasis on appearance at the expense of authenticity. Holiday specials succeed on charm, human moments, and vulnerability, one analyst wrote. This one succeeds on visual polish, but that's about it. Others echoed similar sentiments, framing Meghan as a host more concerned with crafting an image than sharing an emotional experience. The narrative quickly became one of control versus connection. Observers noted the absence of candid humor, the the lack of interaction with children, and the meticulous presentation of every activity. Every camera angle, every wax seal, every perfectly arranged ornament became symbolic of the broader critique that the host prioritized image over emotional engagement. The conversation was no longer just about the special. It was about perception, identity, and authenticity. Insiders provide an interesting perspective on this period. According to several sources, Meghan experienced a private, emotional response that was intense yet measured. Unlike public reaction, which was loud, fast, and unforgiving, her personal experience was quiet but deeply affecting. Crew members noted moments where she reportedly retreated from public-facing interactions, processing the feedback in private. She was said to be reflective, analyzing each critique with a mix of frustration and determination. This internalization is critical to understanding the next layer of the story. Meghan, acutely aware of her image and the stakes involved, reportedly felt a deep sense of responsibility, not just to her audience, but to the concept of the special itself. The effort, thought, and time she invested had been substantial. Every detail, from tree placement to craft demonstrations, had been meticulously planned. The criticism, therefore, felt like a critique not merely of a television special, but of her judgment, her creativity, and, by extension, herself. Yet, the public perception didn't pause to acknowledge effort. Online commentary quickly framed the special as joyless, Stepford-like, and controlled. The absence of Archie and Lilibet became a focal point, with audiences noting that the most essential element of holiday warmth, the family presence, was missing. Critics emphasized that the lack of children and casual, unplanned moments created an emotional void. The intended message of warmth and festive cheer was thus reframed as artificiality and detachment. The contrast between intent and perception is central here. While Meghan designed the special to project intimacy and joy, viewers interpreted the same actions as calculated, staged, and emotionally distant. This gap, between what was intended and what was received, is a recurring theme in high-profile media projects, particularly for public figures like Meghan. The more intentional the performance, the higher the risk of misinterpretation. It is also crucial to consider the role of social media amplification. Within hours, the commentary had evolved from individual critiques to a collective narrative. Clips of perfectly wrapped presents, carefully orchestrated crafting sessions, and precise hosting gestures were juxtaposed with captions that highlighted perceived artificiality. Hashtags emphasizing perfectionism, stage behavior, and lack of spontaneity trended. The viral nature of these posts magnified the original criticism, ensuring that the story was no longer about the holiday special alone. It was about Meghan herself. One insider suggested that this amplification may have been emotionally taxing. It's one thing to hear a critique in a column or review, they said. It's another to see thousands of people dissecting your gestures, expressions, and every tiny movement in real time. For someone as media-conscious as Meghan, the experience could have felt invasive, relentless, and, at times, disheartening. The fallout also extended into professional circles. According to sources, production staff and creative collaborators felt the tension acutely. While the filming process had been meticulously controlled, the public response introduced a new set of pressures. Discussions reportedly occurred among staff about how the special could have been edited or structured differently to foster warmth and spontaneity. These discussions, while speculative, indicate the broader industry awareness that perfection does not always translate to audience engagement. At the same time, there was a psychological dimension to consider. Studies in media psychology suggest that audiences respond to cues of authenticity, imperfection, and vulnerability. Humans are wired to detect spontaneity, subtle gestures of warmth, and emotional nuance. By emphasizing visual perfection and control, the special may have inadvertently suppressed these cues, creating an emotional distance that viewers instinctively recognized. The absence of these elements, combined with the amplified social media narrative, explains the widespread perception of detachment and artificiality. And yet, it's not as if the special lacked effort or intention. Insiders repeatedly emphasize Meghan's meticulous attention to detail, her desire to create a polished and aesthetically pleasing experience, and her focus on offering a refined vision of holiday celebration. From perfectly arranged ornaments to crafted demonstrations of gift wrapping, her commitment to precision was undeniable. The problem, from a perception standpoint, was that these efforts overshadowed warmth, spontaneity, and human connection. The result was a public narrative that Meghan had likely not anticipated. The special was intended as a showcase of festive cheer, intimacy, and personal expression. Instead, it was interpreted as a display of perfectionism and emotional distance. What was meant to convey celebration became, for critics and audiences alike, a study in control, precision, and careful curation. The tension reached a tipping point when entertainment analysts began publicly linking the 1.3/10 rating to specific production choices. In detailed breakdowns, analysts dissected each segment, correlating the absence of children, lack of humor, and meticulous staging with audience disengagement. The narrative became less about, did the audience like the special? And more about, why did the audience perceive it as joyless? This framing reinforced the perception of a disconnect between intention and reception. Meanwhile, insiders describe Meghan's own reflection on these events as quiet but intense. The criticism was not ignored, it was felt. Sources note that she reportedly spent hours reviewing clips, analyzing commentary, and considering alternative approaches. This period of introspection, while private, was formative. It represented a moment in which she confronted the difference between what she intended to communicate and what was actually received, a confrontation that is both deeply human and profoundly instructive for anyone navigating public life. And here's the critical insight. This is not merely a story about ratings or critique. It is a story about perception, emotion, and the fragile relationship between public figures and audiences. It is about the collision between intention and interpretation, control and spontaneity, perfection and authenticity. It is about the ways in which carefully crafted images can be misread, misinterpreted, and amplified in ways that profoundly affect both public perception and private emotion. But the story does not end here. While the reviews, social media commentary, and insider reflections provide crucial context, they are only part of a larger narrative. The next stage would involve deeper reactions, private conversations, and strategic recalibrations that insiders say dramatically influenced Meghan's subsequent choices. The dominoes had begun to fall, and what happened next would extend far beyond ratings or public critique. It would affect her approach to image, narrative control, and public perception in ways that no one anticipated. Because the story of the holiday special is not only about the broadcast itself. It is about the emotional ripple effects, the unseen tension, and the collision between public scrutiny and private intention. And as the narrative unfolds, it becomes clear that every critique, every meme, every comment was just one layer of a much larger story, one in which perception, emotion, and human vulnerability intersected with media, fame, and the pressure to perform flawlessly. And what came next? The reaction was only the beginning. Behind closed doors, Meghan's inner circle began to reassess strategies. Audiences speculated, and the emotional reverberations continued, setting the stage for revelations and consequences that no one could have foreseen. The days following the release of Meghan Markle's holiday special became a whirlwind, not of celebration, but of scrutiny. Ratings numbers, now public, were stark, 1.3/10 on major platforms. Critics were relentless. Social media amplified every perceived misstep. And behind the glossy veneer of television sets, crafted decor, and carefully wrapped presents, a quieter, more profound drama was unfolding. The emotional and psychological impact of the backlash. According to insiders, Meghan felt the weight of criticism more acutely than most would imagine. Unlike a routine television project, this special carried personal stakes. Every detail, her gestures, her smiles, her arrangements, was meticulously curated to communicate warmth, joy, and festive connection. And yet, the public reception reframed these efforts in an entirely different light. Words like joyless, fake, and step-forward hostess weren't just labels. They were reflections of how her work, and by extension herself, was being perceived. But what does it truly mean to be labeled a step-forward hostess? The term evokes an image of someone perfectly poised, impeccably dressed and carefully controlled, yet emotionally detached. In a context designed to showcase human warmth and familial intimacy, it is an especially pointed critique. Audiences did not merely comment on her hosting skills. They questioned authenticity itself. And in a society that increasingly prizes relatability over perfection, that perception is damning. Insiders note that Meghan's response was both private and introspective. She reportedly spent hours analyzing clips of the special, reading reviews, and processing social media commentary. While some might assume anger or defensiveness, sources describe her as calm but deeply reflective. She understood the intent behind the criticism. Audiences crave authenticity, spontaneity, and imperfection. And despite her best efforts to create a warm, inviting holiday experience, the very elements she focused on, precision, visual polish, meticulous curation, were perceived as barriers to connection. At the same time, production staff and collaborators faced their own reckoning. For months, they had worked under the premise that every detail mattered. The sets, lighting, camera angles, and activities were all designed to reflect meticulous care. Yet the public and critical response revealed an unintended consequence. In emphasizing perfection, they had inadvertently dampened the emotional resonance. "We thought we were helping," one producer said, "but maybe we were just building walls." The absence of children, Archie and Lilibet, became a focal point in critiques and audience discussions. Holiday specials thrive on family presence because it is a universal connector. Children's laughter, playful spontaneity, and candid reactions create intimacy that resonates across demographics. Their absence in the special, insiders suggest, left an emotional vacuum. While the decision may have been based on privacy, scheduling, or production constraints, the audience interpreted it as a symbolic gap, a missing heartbeat in what was otherwise a visually immaculate performance. Pearson's review, alongside others, highlighted this emotional gap. She noted the meticulous focus on decor, crafts, and gift wrapping while juxtaposing it against the absence of human imperfection. "Fussing over the presentation of dishes without communicating genuine enthusiasm for food," she wrote. Such observations struck a chord with viewers who shared anecdotes online, commenting on the overly controlled interactions and lack of humor. Memes circulated of her carefully placing a ribbon or adjusting an ornament, each clip reinforcing the perception of detachment. Social media, in particular, magnified every nuance. Platforms like Twitter and TikTok thrived on short-form commentary that emphasized visual moments over context. Clips showcasing meticulous gestures went viral, with captions drawing attention to perceived stiffness or control. These micro-moments, when isolated from broader context, became shorthand for critiques of the host herself. In this way, a few seconds of footage carried a disproportionate influence over public perception. The psychological impact of this amplification cannot be understated. For someone in Meghan's position, under constant scrutiny, every clip, meme, and tweet represents more than entertainment. It is a public measure of approval, a reflection of how personal efforts are received. Insiders note that this period was emotionally taxing, describing private moments where she reportedly felt both frustration and determination. The disconnect between intent and perception was profound, and it required both reflection and strategic consideration. It's also essential to examine the paradox of control. By striving for perfection, ensuring each frame was visually stunning, each gesture precise, Meghan inadvertently reinforced the very critiques she sought to avoid. Human audiences respond to imperfection as a signal of authenticity. By removing, or at least minimizing, these imperfect moments, the special projected distance, rigidity, and control. The irony, insiders say, was that the meticulousness intended to enhance engagement instead highlighted separation. And yet, the special was not devoid of effort or care. Crew members reported moments of genuine warmth behind the scenes, laughs shared privately, interactions that were playful and heartfelt, glimpses of authenticity that never reached the screen. These glimpses suggest that the production was not without humanity. Rather, the process of translation from behind-the-scenes reality to final edited product filtered out spontaneity in favor of visual polish. Media psychologists note that this dissonance between intention and perception is common in high-profile productions, especially those involving public figures under intense scrutiny. The more carefully one crafts an image, the more the public perceives construction. The more meticulously one plans, the less room there is for human imperfection to shine through. And when authenticity is filtered, the audience feels a gap. The result is not only criticism of the work, but questioning of the individual's character, approach, and emotional authenticity. Amid this backdrop, Meghan's emotional journey is particularly compelling. She reportedly processed critiques not as attacks, but as feedback, reflecting on what resonated and what fell flat. Sources indicate that she considered how future projects could balance aesthetic perfection with emotional accessibility, spontaneity, and warmth. This introspection, while private, was formative, a critical moment in her understanding of how public perception intersects with personal intent. At the same time, discussions within her inner circle reportedly became more strategic. Advisors, producers, and collaborators analyzed audience reaction, social media trends, and critical commentary. They debated which elements of the special had succeeded visually, which had failed emotionally, and how future content could better convey warmth and authenticity without sacrificing visual appeal. According to insiders, this period marked a turning point, a recalibration of approach, informed by both personal reflection and external feedback. Yet the public narrative continued to evolve. Analysts and cultural commentators dissected the special across various dimensions: staging, pacing, interactions, and thematic elements. Each observation reinforced the central critique that meticulous control and visual polish were insufficient substitutes for warmth, humor, and spontaneity. Every carefully arranged detail became symbolic of emotional distance. The collective perception, insiders noted, was that while the host was present, she remained unattainable. Perhaps the most telling aspect of this chapter is the interplay between visibility and vulnerability. Meghan's holiday special was designed to be a window into her world, a chance for audiences to engage with her vision of celebration. Yet the very act of opening oneself up to public view, while meticulously managing each element, heightened vulnerability. Every gesture, every expression, every decision became subject to interpretation, and in this case, much of that interpretation skewed toward critique rather than appreciation.